Hello everyone, today I will show you how to create a parallax effect on a web page. I'm just only using vanilla JavaScript for this, and this is the final result. I will create a repository for this and the link will be down below so that you can also follow along. The first thing that I did already is create a folder called parallax, and in there I have 3 files that I will be working in. For my HTML I only have some basic syntax, and I created 2 sections, and these are 3 pieces of text that I will be using for my parallax effect. A parallax effect is essentially just different elements on your page that scroll at different speeds. This is why I also have some classes assigned to a few of them, because I will select them later with JavaScript and give them a different speed. I also have a link to my main CSS and my JavaScript document. In my main CSS I only have some basic reset and the font family, and my JavaScript is empty. So let's just check out how this is looking on the browser. So I'm just gonna serve to my local host. I'm using the live server plugin from Visual Studio Code for this, and as you can see, I can see the text reflected but not much is going on. So let me just go ahead and add some CSS to this. So in my CSS what I need to do is select my container class to give it a certain height so that I'm able to scroll. For example, I'm just going to use 100 VH, and then I'm also going to center my element. So just using flexbox, justify content center, aligning my items to the center as well. Let's check on the website how this is looking. So now I have my text centered. It's kind of small so I can adjust it later, but I also have a bit of a scroll so that I can see the effect when I write it on JavaScript. So I will just add a few lines of CSS to style this. I am just going to speed up through this and then get back to you. Now that I have this, let's just go back to our index.html. So what I want to do is select these 2 elements, the scroll and the scroll 2, and I'm gonna do this with JavaScript. So for the JavaScript piece, we need to create an event listener. So within the window, I'm listening to an event listener, and there are different types, but the one that I'm looking for is the scroll event listener, like this, and then separated by a comma. The second argument that this event listener takes is a function. Inside the function, I'm going to be writing whatever I need to run during this event listener. So the first thing that I need to do is create 2 variables for my 2 elements that I want to edit. So I'm just selecting it like so. So document.querySelector, and then within brackets and within quotation marks I have to specify the class that I want to select, which in my case is scroll, and then I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, paste it down below, and then just change the name of the variable to something different and change the class so that I can target the second element. So now I have my 2 elements. The second thing that I need is my scroll position. So I'm just going to call this scrolled, and the scroll position we can select it by just typing window.pagey offset. To change the rate of this scroll position, I just create a variable called rate, for example, and I need to multiply my scrolls by a certain percentage. So for the first one, I'm going to choose 0.5. To actually apply this scroll speed, I need to target the style transform of this variable. So I'm selecting the variable that I created here, text. I'm selecting the style object that's within it, and then the transform. I'm gonna use an object literal for this, so I'm using the backticks to type this. In here I'm just typing translate 3D, which will allow me to change the X, Y, and Z position. So the first one is just gonna stay unchanged, so it's just 0 pixels, and the second one I'm gonna add the variable that I created for my rate, so that goes between these brackets, and do not forget your pixels value at the end. And then for the last one, again, just 0 pixels. So let's see how this is looking. Seem to have an error. Unterminated template literal. Yes. So I also need to add the back tick at the end. So let's just check this out. So you see now that when I scroll, the first element slows down quite a bit, so it's slowing down by 50%, and the other elements are just scrolling, following the behavior of the normal scroll. So I can replicate this for the second element, and I could create a second rate, just rate 2, and then selecting my scroll position and using a value between 0 and 1. To edit it, let's go with 0.2. I'm going to copy this piece of text, changing the name of the variable and the name of the variable inside of my literal template. So if I check it on my website, then you will see that there are 3 elements that are scrolling in different positions. So that's pretty nice. Let's go ahead and continue just to add another example. So inside of this second section, I'm just going to add 2 pieces of text. Just gonna paste them in to save up some time. Every piece of text has a different class that I can select within my JavaScript. So I'm also gonna go ahead and do this. It's the same that we did before with a query selector. So I'm just gonna copy this and then just edit it a bit. And then let's just quickly check it out on our browser. So it's looking very similar to this one because we still need some styling. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this on my CSS very quickly. You will find this on the GitHub repository, so don't worry too much about copying this part. Voila, so with this piece of code, I'm mainly just changing the flex direction and changing the font size and some other small little tweaks that are not super relevant for this example. So now I can just go ahead and check it out on my website. So it's just looking fine, but with no movement yet. So we're gonna go ahead and add this. So again, I'm copying these 2 pieces of text and I'm just pasting them here and then editing variables, left, right. And then instead of changing this rate here, I'm gonna set this to 0 pixels and actually change the X value. So the first one can actually just take the first rate, and the second one, because I want it to scroll in the opposite position horizontally, I can actually use a min to set a negative value and then use the same rate again. So let's check this on the browser. Something is missing, so let's inspect very quickly, see if we get any errors. Nothing seems to appear. So I was actually just missing my pixel value, of course. So if I now check my browser, then you will see that it's scrolling, and you can adjust these speeds however you would like. I think this is a bit too fast for me, so I'm just gonna quickly change this to 1 and the name of my variable, of course, and then just press 1 and 1 here. This is working way better. So I'm just going to very quickly change the background of the first section. So if I go back into my code, normally I already have a class that I can target, so it's this one. So I'm just gonna target this class and change the background to Alice Blue, for example. I think this is the same that I used in the final result, like this. So now you can see a clear difference between the 2 sections. And now for the last section, we're essentially going to be using the same principle that we did for these 2. Before I dive into the JavaScript, I'm just going to copy in the HTML. So as you can see here, I have another section. Within that section, I have a div for section parallax. And then I have 2 big sections, one for the small little text that's going to become sticky. And then I have another one where I placed my images. So if we look at this on the browser, it's gonna look like this, pretty basic because we don't have any styling. So let's just very quickly go ahead and try and do that. So the first thing that I need to do is just target this element. So I'm just gonna copy the class and paste it onto my CSS. So the first thing that I need to do here is just set this element as position relative because I want to set one of the child elements as sticky. I'm gonna give it a min height so that I'm able to scroll. I'm gonna go for 150 and I'm just gonna also set the background color, which should be something like this. For the next element, which is the text element, I want this to be sticky, so I want it to stick at the top. So I'm setting the position to sticky. I'm setting the top to 0 so that it sticks at the top, and I'm also going to center the elements within. And then lastly, for our images, I'm gonna copy this class, and then again I'm using the flexbox property to center everything. And because it is multiple images, I'm also going to use the wrap property so they wrap nicely when there isn't enough space. Let's quickly check this on the browser. So it's starting to look a bit better, but we still need the parallax effect because now everything is scrolling at the same time, and you will see that the text also sticks at the top, so that's also nice. So to achieve the parallax effect on multiple elements, I'm actually going to create an array outside of the event listener. So for example, random rates, and in here I'm going to be pasting some values from 0 to 1. So I just chose a few random values, and I have chosen as many values as the images that I have, actually just to save up some time. I know this code can be way more efficient, but I'm making it as simple and as basic as possible so that everyone can follow. Inside of my event listener, I need to create a for loop. So just a very simple for loop. Let I equals 1. If I is smaller than 9, because I have 8 images, I plus plus. And then in here I'm going to create a variable for the cat images. So again, the same principle that we used before, document, query selector, and then the class that I've actually used for my images. I've also made it fairly easy for myself, so I have a very similar class for every image, and the only thing that changes is the number. So I'm going to be replacing this number with the I variable that I created so that I can select them all within the same loop and adjust the transform value. So in here I'm going to use a template literal to create my class because I'm using the I variable. So let's make sure we do this correctly. So I have cat dash followed by the number, and then I close my template literal. And then once I have this, I can also create one variable for the rate. So this one is also very similar to the ones before. Instead of a random value, I'm just going to use the array that I created before and select one of my values every time. And then finally, I can just select my cat variable and change the transform property. So in here I'm also making sure to use the template literals again, and for the second value, which is the y value, I'm going to be using the rate, and then finally for my z I'm just going to keep it to 0, and this should be it. So let's check how it's looking on our browser. Nothing much is changing, but I'm noticing some errors. I is not defined, so let's just take a quick look, and indeed I was missing a space right here. So now you should see the images having a slower scroll rate than the rest of the page. Now I see that I have some mishaps here, so I can actually add a bit of padding. So in my CSS, I'm gonna add a padding top of 5 rem. So this is pretty much it. Every time I refresh, I actually get a new set of cats. So just to recap, we have used some parallax on our text. We have also tried to incorporate a horizontal parallax, and then we created a loop to be able to use a parallax effect on multiple images. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!